All right, my man. It's another Market Monday.
It is.
St. Patrick's Day. You got your green on,
I
so
do. I guess
you won't be getting pinched. Dude, I'm
you
greened
sort of,
up.
yeah, you sort
I'm
of
greened.
count. I mean, I
This
guess
is a
you're right.
green, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, this
yeah,
is green.
You're
It's
right.
kind of a
If this was a Zoom call, I wouldn't be sure. I wouldn't be able to
yeah,
tell.
yeah.
But,
The colors would have to be right to
right.
make sure that was a real green. So
Right. Right
cool,
on.
dude. Well, today saw an interesting article that I figured we would talk about.
Yeah.
Apparently, real estate agents are at a all-time, or not an all-time low. They're at a decade low as far as how many agents are actually in the
Yeah.
business. So I feel like that would be good to talk about. And you said it's the same for lenders you're seeing?
Yeah, it seems, and it all is sort of like logical if you consider what's going on like with the market and what the last few years have been like.
Yeah.
It's just, real estate has been, you had COVID where everything like went turbocharged. Rates were very low, and then end of 2021, beginning of 2022, you started to see that change. Rates started to go up, and people factor in interest rate when they purchase something, and so it's can be a less appealing market in that regard. And so on my end, we've seen plenty of lenders, loan officers not renew their license, and the same thing is going on. The same thing's going on with realtors. So for you, I assume that you've had some people, that you've known here at the brokerage and other places that have left. What are they saying? They're, do you have conversations about why they're making the change, why they're getting out?
Anybody that I've seen like leave the brokerage or not renew their license, like it's usually not a surprise.
Yeah.
Right. I never realized how expensive it was to like keep your license active and all your MLS dues and all that kind of stuff. So especially here at RE/MAX, we have a RE/MAX fee that we have to pay, at the beginning of every year.
Yeah.
Plus we have all of our MLS dues to keep, to be able to log in and, schedule showings and blah, blah, that stuff. And so, if you're not doing at least a couple deals a year, like it usually doesn't make sense necessarily to keep renewing it. Yeah. And then you got your continuing education you got to do every 2 years, which all that stuff is free. You can go pay for some other courses, but we do have access to free continuing education, but it's just a process, right? And if you're not actually doing it, it doesn't really make sense to pay the money, go through so a lot of people end up putting their license in like referral, which means like if, my brother wants to buy a house and mine's in referral, I can send them to another agent that is active and I can get a little referral fee still. But I'm really not surprised. And some of the stats from that article that I read make sense of why we saw so many agents drop out in the last couple of years. But before we dive into it, do you have any, like, if a lender drops out of the business, like, are you surprised by it, or is it pretty consistent as far as like what they say is the reason they dropped out?
So it's a sales business, right? It's a commission sales, and so a lot of times people will look at that business and they'll look at people that are successful, or they look at people that appear to be successful, right? Social media is a big part of both like lending and real estate, and so you are going to have some people that are going to get in it and simply just, it's not what they expect it to be.
Yeah.
Right. It's a different process. And so on my end, with the transition, so I got in the business at the beginning of 2022 when rates were really low. I've said this before, I got off to a great start, and then in April, like, rates started to spike, and basically the March that I'm having right now equals the best month that I had in this business, which was March of 2022, the third month I was in the business.
Right.
And so, people see at that period of time, for me, I had friends in the business that were, they had flexibility in their schedule, right? COVID basically put lending like into like a remote situation where it had been primarily like in office, and so that was appealing. Plus, they were making good money, right? It was a refinance boom, all that type of stuff, and so it was very appealing to get into it. But like anything else, you see like people that are successful, you don't necessarily see the work and everything that goes into it.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have a percentage of people that are going to get into a business, and then they're going to get, and again, we've talked about the barrier of entry for both these deals are pretty low. You just have to like pass a test, right? It's a little different. It's a little different for a lender, but for you, you can just go out, get your license, figure
literally
out
everything online for a couple $100.
Right.
Go take your fee. You can get your license for under $500.
Yeah.
And like never talk to a person. Just do your online stuff. Go read through it all. do your Quizlet flashcards, you know, and go take your test. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so then you get into the business, and then you realize, you know, what the business is about.
Yeah.
Now, if you're fortunate in some situations where you come in as part of a team, or you have an organization, we've talked about this before, that has like some sort of onboarding process for you, okay, maybe that transition is a little easier. But for a lot of people, I think they see it and they don't understand, or maybe not a lot of people, but there's a percentage of people that don't understand the work that the job actually entails.
For sure. I think a lot of people hear real estate and they think like easy money.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'll go sell a house and I'll get a $10,000 commission check.
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize how difficult, and sure, that's going to happen a deal falls in your lap every once in a while, right? Like you have a family member or a friend that needs your help and boom. But to actually make it your career and have this consistently happening, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 times a month, I mean, that's a pretty difficult thing to actually build and then sustain that over a long term.
Yeah.
So I feel like, you know, I think you've said this before, but like 75% of statistics are made up on the spot, or so, you know, whatever that.
Right.
But I remember seeing, I think it's like 87% or something like that of realtors fail after the first year, and basically just get out of the business after that, just because it's like, they just don't know what to expect, right? People don't know it's a sales job, right?
Well, I mean, and it's interesting because I've seen it on social media the last couple of weeks, and maybe you've seen it as well. And again, we're talking about statistics. I think what I've seen on social media is something like 71% of realtors like didn't like do a transaction, or maybe did a single transaction like in 2024. And so you have low barrier of entry into a very like competitive, like hyper competitive industry.
Yeah.
And so it's no surprise that you're going to have a lot of people that just simply are not producing. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, a good example of this is you know, people that they get their license because they think they want to be, you know, maybe I'm going to get into real estate investing, right? And so I'm going to like cut out the realtor. I'm going to save some money. It's going to be less expensive to do it that way. Mm-hmm. I have friends and family that are looking to get into the market, so I'll get my license so I can, you know, I can do their transactions. And then again, they get into the business, and the reality of it is different. But one thing, so you know, you and I met at an open house, right? That's where most of the realtors that I work with, that's how I met them. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing over the last, you know, year and a half, as I continue to do that process, when I first started doing it, I would walk, if I did 10 open houses over the course of a weekend, I would probably have, you know, 4 or 5 people that had been in that business or been in real estate for 2-3 months, something like that, just very early in the game.
Yeah.
And, you know, now as I continue that process, I mean, it's not that I don't get new realtors, but just a lot of those people have dropped off. You know, if I go to 10, I might get 1 or 2, you know, and and there's a different vibe. Now, it is incredibly satisfying here now, a year and a half later, that I have relationships with people that I met who'd been doing it for 60 days at that time. I've watched their business grow. Right. But it's just a lot of work. And most people, I don't think, understand, you know, everything it involves.
Yeah. So I was really surprised to like look at these numbers of how many like, and this is for full-time agents, mm-hmm. as far as these numbers I'm about to say. So in 2013, right, so kind of as the housing market crash is starting to, you know, not be as bad, right? We're starting to recover a little bit from the 2008 crash. There was just over 500,000 full-time real estate agents in the United States. Okay. In 2019, right before COVID happened, there was 543,000. Okay. So pretty similar numbers, you know, for the most, 40,000 more, but, you know, over 6 years. So in 2024, now we have dropped to 398,000. So we've lost, since 2019, roughly 140,000 real estate agents, which is pretty significant. Actually, I mean, that's a pretty big number. And in that article I was reading, there's really 3 factors they say cause that. I think one is really the biggest one, but the first is just market cool down since COVID, right? Which we have the statistics and all that stuff. Like, it's a different market than it was in 2021, 2022. Another thing, which I think is not the case at all, but they said technology and AI is starting to, there's ways for agents to leverage technology and AI, but I don't think people are dropping out of the business because of technology and AI.
I mean, I'm sure it's an excuse. You know,
it
I'm
could
sure
be
it's something they look at, you know, but I mean, people are dropping out because they're not making money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty simple deal.
Yeah, and the industry got more difficult since August of 2024, which I think is the biggest reason is the lawsuits that happened.
You think so?
Yeah.
You think the NAR has contributed to that?
I think so, because the fall off is nuts. So in 2022, there was 512,000 agents. In 2023, when the market started to kind of cool down and interest rates got a little higher, it dropped to 440. And now in 2024, with all the lawsuit scares and all that stuff, it dropped down below 400 to 398. And so, I mean, I guess there was a pretty big jump from 2022 to 2023, maybe because rates were higher and the market is just not as easy to go make money, right? But I feel like the lawsuit stuff was just a nail in the coffin for a lot of those agents that were kind of on the fence, because most agents tend to be buyer heavy.
Yeah.
Right. It's easier to work with a buyer. You don't have to know as much about the market. You don't have to have any marketing strategies. You don't have to know how to price properties, to list them and sell them. And before all the lawsuit stuff, like if you're a potential buyer lead for me, my process would be we meet up at the office, we do initial consultation, chit chat. Okay, cool. We like each other. Let's go look at houses. Right. So we never talk commissions. We never talk money. I don't have to have you sign a contract before we do anything. We like each other. We want to work together. Cool. We just assume that we're going to do this thing, and we start going looking at houses, and then everything happens. Now, and I saw this, like so many agents I saw drop out of the business because of the lawsuit stuff, with having to explain your value and tell a buyer that, hey, you potentially might be on the hook for my commission, no matter what that is, and you have to sign this contract before I can go show you these houses. People that were not into sales, people that did not know how to communicate their value or didn't even maybe know their value, that was such a scary thing for them that I saw a ton of agents drop out, and especially the buyer agent heavy. It was just this big fear factor for a lot of agents.
I think that I don't think anybody left because of NAR that wasn't like already like out the door. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. They were already halfway out the door, and that was like, oh, well, now I gotta.
Yeah.
No, I don't know how to explain that or whatever.
Yeah.
They just weren't in the loop.
I mean, you say like the nail in the coffin, and you're right. That it may have been like the tipping point for somebody, but from my experience, I mean, do you feel like with NAR that you're, signing having that agreement up front? Do you feel like it's changed has it changed your process? Has it impacted your business?
It hasn't impacted my business, but the process had to change because the contracts are different. You have to set a different expectation with buyers up front as far as, because again, before, I never talked, like with a buyer, I didn't have to talk about commissions. And so it was more so like, why are you wanting to move? What are you looking for? Like figuring out why they're doing what they're doing, what's important about it, what are we looking for, what's the ideal situation, blah, 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 timelines, all that stuff. And so now we still do all that stuff, but we also have to say, hey, there's this buyer agency contract that I need you guys to sign because of this lawsuit, blah, 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 blah. Here's what it says. Here's what it means. Right. So now I have to go and explain, which I like that. Like it's a way to set me apart and explain some of my value. Because a lot of people look at the paperwork and they don't even know what the heck they're looking at. Right. And a lot of agents don't even explain the paperwork. They just dot loop it over and have them initial it. Right. And so when you can actually break down the contract and all that kind of stuff and explain it to them and make the client feel comfortable signing that stuff, again, it hasn't affected my business. It's just changed the process. And on the listing side, too, it's different on the listing side as far as before how I would negotiate commissions versus how I talk about commissions now with the seller.
And that was what it was about, right? It really didn't change anything like structurally that's happening within the market or like within like real estate and how commissions are paid. It just like you had to state it, right? You had to like the client had to like sign off on it.
Yeah.
And so so a lot of the agents that I work with, and so I remember when this thing rolled out, I remember that week, everybody kind of like, okay, all right, here we go. What's going to happen? And I sort of thought it would take, when you consider that all across the country, the thousands of transactions that take place, in a week. I sort of thought, okay, in 60 days, it's going to be ironed out. It's going to be sorted out. There'll be enough transactions that people know how to like deal with it.
Right.
And it was like, from what I saw and from the relationships, the agents that I have relationships with, it was like a big like nothing. It was like
Literally,
it was like Y2K for like realtors.
yeah,
Like,
no, seriously. Well, it was so funny because, like, again, leading up to the whole lawsuit stuff, like, okay, August 17th is the big day. That's when everything changes. And again, there was all this fear built up around it, like, oh, buyers agents commissions are going to be gone, and you know, buyers agents are going to go extinct and all this stuff. And like literally nothing has changed.
Right.
As far as like the actual process, how agents get paid, all that stuff, it's literally the exact same. And even in this article, they said, like, I think prior to this, like the average buyer's agent's commission for whatever numbers they used was like 2.4, and now it's 2.37.
Yeah.
So like it's basically the same.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
I don't know that I've been a part of a transaction since it came out that anything was structured differently. That the selling side did not handle handle that like as is the customary practice.
Yeah.
I think that now, so if you're already out, well, there's a really good excuse to make that transition. On the lender side, when I got into lending, I was working. I worked online. I was doing basically like internet loans is what I was doing. And so I was licensed in all 50 states. I was taking leads that were coming through, and it was, again, rates were in the threes, so it was actually a pretty simple deal. It was 100% transactional, but it was pretty simple. There was opportunity there. As rates started to go up, it became more of a challenge. Ultimately, to the point that I got out of business that way, right? I was at Bison, I was at MBKC, and ultimately I got out and I came to Fountain. And the interesting thing is, I think that across the board, loan officers have left, just like realtors. As it's gotten more difficult. Just to kind of back up, so I was in the car business, and so when I was in the car business, you sort of would see these people like you wanted the car business if you got out and you went to mortgages.
Yeah.
And so, I made that transition to mortgages, and there was like a half dozen other guys that I knew at different dealerships within the industry that did it. And I think there's me and one other guy that I'm aware of that actually are still in the business.
Really?
Yeah, because commission salespeople to some extent will sort of like chase where like the easier money is.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? And so when it became a challenge, like as the rates went back up, people start looking at the car business. Now you sacrifice time and stuff like that. And so I saw all those people go out. Now I consider myself very fortunate that I just fell into my situation at Fountain, right? I was looking to make a change, but when you consider as a lender, like, does it make a difference to you if like the lender is a local lender that like you have some sort of relationship with, or if it's like, Rocket Mortgage or just some other online lender? I mean, when you taken off, I mean, does it, how do you think about that?
I personally prefer local.
Yeah.
Like as far as like, let's say I have a listing. I have two offers here. I got one from you. Let's say I didn't even know you, right? But I see an 816 number or a 913 or something, or a company I recognize that I know is local versus a Rocket Money pre-approval.
Yeah.
I mean, again, there's a lot of terms that go into that, but if we're just isolating who the lender is, I want to go local all day because I know Rocket. I'm not going to be able to. It's probably going to be a pain in the butt to actually get them on the phone and like actually verify all the pre-approval, where we at in underwriting, blah blah that stuff. Yeah. Versus I know a local guy. I can call them, probably get them on the phone pretty easy, actually have a conversation, especially if we run into a hiccup. Like if we run into a hiccup, it is terrible working with like these like national branches and all that stuff. Like I even did a deal with a local bank, and it was completely terrible, dude. Like I could never get this lender on the phone. We never got like any kind of closing disclosure. Like I was never notified of when the appraisal was coming in, when we got the appraisal back, when the closing, all that stuff. So I'm talking to my client. I'm like, hey, have you heard from the bank? And they're like, yeah, they emailed me. And I'm like, well, thank goodness you're in contact because I can't get a hold of them to save my life. So, we ended up getting it done, but
now there are and I feel like I was one of them, and I know some that are still in that industry. You can have a terrific experience with an online lender. You can, because again, it depends on who you get, right?
Exactly.
It's like luck of the draw.
Yeah.
But when you consider, I mean, I was effectively in call centers. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't that I wasn't doing like loan stuff, but like my business in that the primary focus of my day was cranking out 70, 80 phone calls, right?
Right.
It had and I had to be good when I got on the phone, but like it had very little to do with relationship, which is
Yeah.
so different from what I do now.
Mhm.
And so, where I think you've seen the most attrition in that business is like those online lenders.
Yeah.
Because it's, if you don't have a relationship. I met a financial planner at a couple weeks ago, who lives here in Kansas City, and he was in LA. His wife was in Kansas City, and he would call. I think he called on golf courses, something with point of sale, like golf courses type stuff.
Okay.
And he was like killing it in LA. Come out. Kansas City was part of my market. He's like, I'd come out here, I'd have all these great experiences, and nobody would ever I couldn't close anything. I couldn't get a deal. My wife has a job opportunity out here. We move out here, and then I get it. Like, you have to be in Kansas City.
Yeah.
Like that local, all of a sudden he's a Kansas City resident. And now all these doors open for him.
Right.
And I did not think in this state, in 2023, that, that relationship piece of it was that important. Like, I knew it was important, but
Right.
everything happens for like efficiency and cost and all that
Yeah.
type of stuff. And I thought, okay, it's not going to matter that I'm not in the market. But it turns out it does. And it's probably, it's a big part of why I'm still in the business, considering how choppy the market's been over the
Right.
last couple of years. And so on the lender side, a lot of that stuff is that online lenders. I think that you're seeing some local people that have relationships have kind of been able to survive, but it's because they
Yeah.
have the relationships. Now it's different for you because, you're always local, right? You're always
Yeah, we
always
have to
dealing
be
with
local.
people.
But I would say no matter like lending or realtor, there's people that do it from a transactional standpoint and a relational standpoint, right? And there's some people that are just like, okay, this is the next deal, where's my next deal? That's just another number. How much am I getting off of this house? And I feel like those people are the ones that end up burning out or not being able to stay in it very long.
Yeah.
Because it's just this turn and burn business where, like, they call real estate a relationship business, right? For a reason, right? Like, we want to do a great job for our clients, then we want those clients to then tell all their friends and family about us so that they then send us more referrals, right? And so if you're running this kind of turn and burn business, that never starts to happen. You never start to get this like compound effect. And so, like, normally, like what I've seen in real estate is like year one, you do a handful of deals, and then year two, it kind of compounds a little bit because now you got, some raving fans that are kind of singing your praises. And then, you make it, if you can make it to year 5 or 6, you basically have this business that's kind of turning out clients as far as all these referrals and repeat customers. But, you see it on the lending side and the realtor side where, once an agent closes a deal with a client, they never talk to them again. 5 years later, the client can't even remember who the realtor was that sold them the house.
Yeah.
Maybe they had a bad experience because the agent didn't care about,
Right.
the client experience they were delivering. And so I think that's probably another reason why, agents drop out after a few years. It's like, gosh, like this is a grind every single day because I have to keep making phone calls and these people never repeat, send me anybody and all this stuff. And so, that starts to wear you down after a while.
Well, transactions are going to like vary with the market, right? They're going to go up and down. And so if you don't have transactions to like work on, what are you going to be working on? Well, you should be working on your relationships.
Yeah, 100%.
And since I'm no longer just like in a call center or in my basement all the time, now you got to work harder, right? Because when the market is down, when there are less transactions, there are just less transactions. And there's less deals. But the people that are established, the people that have a track record, that have become like part of the community, a known quantity in the community in which they like serve, they're just going to fare better in this situation. And you've got a lot of like, there's just, if you look at, what's going on, with the economy right now, right? Like, I guess we're, they're saying that like stocks are entering, equities are entering like a correction or whatever. It just, that type of stuff just happens.
Yeah.
You see that cycle, and you've got, so there were way too many realtors, and there were way too many lenders. And it's not that I root for people to fail, but like, I certainly like the fact that I'm like still left standing.
No, for sure. Yeah. And that's what I think is like the opportunity, right? It's like, because, and I don't think people are aware of this, but, from a real estate market standpoint, we're looking at like 2008 numbers as far as like total units sold. I can't remember what it was, but we're around like 4 million units sold in 2024, and it was roughly that in 2008 as well. And so, like, from a transactional standpoint of like how many houses are being sold, it's been pretty rough. Like they're like transactions are down. And so, you know, again, that it also makes sense why 140,000 realtors have dropped out because it's hard to make it happen.
Yeah.
And so for us that are still left standing, it provides more market share for us, right? Like, okay, things are slower right now. It is harder to make it happen right now. But again, if we're the ones that can actually, you know, stand and survive through this, then we're the ones that kind of have that reputation already built up. And so we're going to be able to take advantage of stuff as it starts to pick back up.
Well, I think that I think we've talked about this a number of times. I mean, if you can survive like the bad markets, you know, I mean, then you're going to be able to survive like the good market.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, so you develop these skills. You have to work, you know, harder. At the same time, you have, like for me, I have no frame of reference, right? It's not like I'd spent years in
right, yeah.
You know, it's just a really, really hard job.
Yeah.
And then what happens is the results start to come, you know, and so you kind of, I feel like I'm blessed in the sense that, like, you know, I had to develop skills and processes for a really difficult market, and that should serve me and actually help me to like scale and be more efficient, like as the market improves.
Yeah, and that's funny you say that because apparently I got into the business when everybody else was dropping out.
Right.
Because I didn't get licensed till 2023, and we had lost about 70,000 realtors, you know, from the previous year. And so, you know, I do hear that though, where people are like, oh, this market is, you know, other agents in the office or just in the industry period of like, you know, in different groups online and stuff of, oh, this market is so tough. I need to pick up a second job so I can, you know, pay my bills and stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know any different. Like, this is all I know is because this is how I'm starting out. And so, like, all I know that if this is the quote unquote rough times, I'm ready for the good times because, like, you know, we're surviving right now, but I can only imagine what's going to happen in the time to come.
And I went through, it's, you know, it's funny because as I went into mortgages, as the market like started to kind of like crack or become more difficult, you know, the industry that I left was like experiencing like a golden era. You know, I mean, it was, you know, you had a microchip shortage, you had less inventory, and a dealership for the first time, and I wasn't in there when it happened, but basically you could just like take it or leave it. Well, I was there for a little bit of it, but yeah, you just, if you had the car, you could sell it for whatever.
The car market was nuts for a little while.
You know, and so, you know, there were plenty of times that I was like, oh, you know, I can just like make that, I can slide back in, I have friends, there's opportunities. And I would tell my wife, and she just, you know, I'm grateful for her because she just like kept me like, nope, like this is the plan, like this is what we're gonna do. But it is, it's, you know, it hasn't been easy, but it also hasn't, you know, when I look at the numbers, it hasn't felt as hard. You know, so you say you got into the business in 2023, right? And it's sort of all you know. It's a good analogy for like, is now the right time to buy a house?
I was just thinking about that in my mind, right? I'm like, oh, should I have timed the realtor market, right? Like,
no, but it just goes.
I think I actually timed it perfectly.
Yes, but it goes to show how much of it is just about the individual and their situation, and then just like your like mindset that you're gonna just like figure it out. Because every opportunity, every time somebody is like, this sucks, there's somebody who looks at whatever that is that sucks as like an opportunity.
Can I tell you, like, whoever heard me talking about getting into real estate at the time when I was talking about it probably thought I was the biggest idiot they've ever heard.
Yeah.
Right? Because I had all the health issue crap. So, like, God, it's so crazy to even think about, right? Like, I had all the health issue stuff going on with the ulcerative colitis stuff. I had just gotten my whole colon removed, and I'm off work for the next like 7 months with training. And like, I would pop in for like 2 weeks and I was approved. Like, there'd be like a 2-week window or a 3-week window before like I was approved to go back to work and before my next surgery.
Yeah.
And so I'd pop into the gym for a couple weeks and like, you know, train people for a quick second and then pop back out for another 3 months for recovery. But if you really think about it, you know, looking at the stats now, the housing market wasn't doing too great, right? My health was not doing too great. Who knew what was going on with that? My daughter was just born, and I'm like in the hospital studying for my real estate license while I have like a 3-month-old baby sitting next to me. And I'm like, yeah, it's a great time for me to switch careers right now. And, you know, so again, like thinking about timing the market or timing, waiting for the perfect time, I guess, to do what, insert X, right? Waiting for the perfect time to do whatever it is that you want to go do. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And I feel like for me, it was a perfect, like, I think last week we talked about, like, okay, there's got to be a need or a desire or a want, right? Or maybe we talked about it on your podcast, or there has to be a need, and then that ignites change.
Right.
Right. And so, like, I knew what I wanted was to have time freedom. I wanted to have flexibility to make more income if I wanted to. And I knew I wasn't going to have that in my current situation. And so I was like, okay, now is the right time for me because I have all this free time to study for this, and I can do this and that. And like, especially with like my daughter being born, I had like another like kind of fire under my ass as far as like, how am I going to support, my family and all this stuff. So, there's never a perfect time to do anything. And sometimes, when the market is going down, it's actually a perfect opportunity to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's opportunity in any situation. And, I think, I got in the mortgage, but so I had already I'd been through a divorce. I just had a lot of like chaos in my life already. And I was like, I mean, it's all blown up already. Do you know what I mean? Like, what's the worst that can happen?
Dude, I thought the exact same thing with the real estate stuff.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's like, now maybe we're confusing podcasts, but I can't remember if I had this conversation with you last week or with somebody else, but we were talking about how, like transitionary times, like tend to be opportunities for like a lot of different things that you're not even accounting for.
Yeah.
And I think that, for me, it just made sense like now to do it. But it's funny because when I gave my notice, so in the car business, the whole goal was to, if you weren't trying to get out into mortgages, but like become a general manager, have like your own store to run. So I never did that. I was a general sales manager. I ran the sales side of it. And I remember when I gave my notice to Rick, my boss, he was like, I literally just had a conversation with his boss about how you're like ready, to make that step. And so I had a little bit of like satisfaction in the sense that like, okay, that's kind of cool. But I was just like, I just was like, I was done with it. And I had, in my head, I had already started like thinking like, what could my life be like, with mortgages.
For sure.
But I am now at a point at 50 where I just sort of kind of am looking for opportunities to blow everything up, because it seems like when I do, it tends to like sort of work out. So you shouldn't be scared of it. And all these things, whether you're getting into the business, as a realtor or a lender, or whether you're getting into the market as a buyer or a seller, like just do it when it's right for you. And if you try to time it based on everything else, it's not to say you can't like figure it out and time it at the perfect time, but like there's so many variables you can't control. I mean, we can't control the climate in this room, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So at some point you just have to just kind of say, okay, I'm in, and then just like commit to it. But I mean, at the end of the day, realtors, lenders, we're in this business, and we're producing based on what's going on with the market. So I mean, how's the market look right now?
Let's check these stats out.
So how was well, let me ask you more anecdotally, like just like real world. How was your weekend?
How was my weekend? What did I do? I completely checked out this weekend.
Okay. That's important. You can do that.
Yeah. Well, I think I've told you about this whole, like, I had this deal blow up last week with this whole appraisal thing. And so, like, there was, like, talks of court and this and that. And I think we got it ironed out. Yeah. But, dude, I felt so burnt. And just, like, as far as, like, all my mental, like, emotional energy, like, went towards, like, trying to put this fire out. Yeah. That, like, Saturday, I just went to the Snake Saturday parade with, like, my wife and my daughter. And we did that. And, like, went home, ate some lunch. I took a nap. You know what I mean? Like, just like totally disconnect. I showed a couple houses on Sunday, which nothing came of that. But yeah, really just, I had to disconnect a little bit. And I think, again, I feel like some agents drop out because it's this like, oh, it's so stressful. I can't handle it. It's like real estate can get super stressful with stuff. And so like there's a total burnout factor involved too. And so I tend to like not disconnect enough and like kind of be plugged in too much to everything, or like maybe not balance the whole work-life thing. And so, yeah, dude, Saturday, I just had to completely I just put my phone in a whole different room, took my watch off so I couldn't get any notifications, and just kind of disconnected. So, what about you?
Yeah, I had a client want to meet, which was exciting because most of the time I'm not meeting clients until closing. And so she is looking in 2 different markets that I'm licensed at. She's considering the state of Washington and Kansas City. And she's got ties to Kansas City. I think Kansas City probably makes the most sense.
Yeah.
But she wanted to sit down and talk to me, and she asked me at one point, she was like, am I being inefficient in this process by wanting to know the lender and the realtor that, like, if I want to know them, that I'm going to do business with? And my answer was like, yeah, kind of, but that's how I am, right? You know, I mean, like, things don't always have to be efficient, right? That chase for efficiency has led to some pretty dark stuff in the world today. And so it was kind of nice to sit there and have this conversation with somebody who, like I am, like, really kind of wants to connect and, like, get to know you.
I think that's important.
And so that was really enjoyable to do that. And you know, I think we sort of have a plan to proceed. But and then I had a couple open houses on Sunday. Hung out and watched a buddy of mine's kid play baseball.
Nice.
I had stuff going on. I didn't get anything under contract. I put together a couple scenarios, but like at Fountain, we had 3 different lenders with pre-approvals on the same property.
Oh, dang, yeah.
And it ultimately sold for $100,000 over list. And one of the Fountain lenders like won that deal.
Nice.
But it was interesting because we got on the phone this morning. We do this thing every other week where we kind of talk about, like, what's, you know, what are we marketing, what are we talking about with our clients and our realtors. And so they were talking about these three offers. And so I don't know what you're going to tell us about the market, but I did have a lot of conversations with people over the weekend, and there are parts of Kansas City that it is like multiple offer
crazy.
And
Yeah.
100,000. Now, we've talked about the strategy with pricing low.
Yeah,
and this
they
house
probably
needed a lot of work.
Yeah.
But
you know what? Sometimes those are the ones that really pop off, because, like, I feel like sometimes if a house needs a lot of work and the listing agent's, like, looking at it from, like, a data standpoint, like, oh, it needs, you know, this, and that to, you know, make it comparable with this comp. And
yeah.
You know what I mean? So then it's like, okay, you know, everything in the neighborhood's for 300, but this thing probably needs 100K worth of work.
Yeah,
So let's
and that's
list it at 2.
exactly what the situation was.
Yeah, and then it just goes nuts because people's imaginations start going with all the possibilities and stuff.
Yeah.
I had a deal like that where I think the house was listed at like 239, and it was an acre lot in Liberty. Whole house needed like quite a bit of work. And dude, like, the showing started at like 10 a.m. on Saturday, so we were like there right when it first started, and there was like 8 or 9 other agents there showing it.
Yeah.
And like it felt like an open house, and we ended up winning that deal, but we had to go super aggressive on price and terms to like win that over. But my client was like, "Dude, this is the house I got to have," so we got it done. But
well, I think that you know, there's a lot of things that I think people should go to open houses. I think if you're in our business, you should, you know, I'm not necessarily saying you should host one like every weekend, but it should be part of your process. And if you're a lender, you're just like, I mean, you're just missing out by not like going where the people actually are, know, in the product that you're actually trying to sell.
Yeah.
But over the weekend, it was super encouraging. I went to 4 open houses. I talked to a couple other agents that were hosting open houses, and everybody was like, we were slam packed. Right now, the weather was nice, you know, over the weekend, a little chilly.
Right.
But so I don't know what these numbers are going to tell us, but I can just tell you anecdotally what I can feel like in the market right now is Kansas City setting up.
Oh yeah, no, it's everything's. I mean, the market is good. It's just demand seems to be a little down. So overall, so we're looking at year over year, right? So February of last year, February this year. So I actually brought our January numbers as well. But I thought this was super interesting that compared to January versus February, days on market is actually higher.
Yeah.
And so
that's all snow. That is all weather.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
And so I think part of this days on market being up too is, you know, obviously the longer a house sits, the more calendar days we're going to have. And so some of these, like, you know, if these were listed at the end of, let's say, December, right before Christmas and all that stuff, sometimes some of these houses tend to sit longer. And something I noticed over the weekend, so I showed 1 in Gladstone and then 3 in Kansas. And the ones in the Gladstone one was fine, but the ones in Kansas, she started sending me houses on Thursday, and we couldn't make it out there till Sunday. And so the 3 that we ended up looking at were all kind of duds. And so part of this like whole days on market thing and just what I'm seeing in the market overall is the good ones go fast, and then the not so good ones tend to sit.
Yeah.
Right. And so like buyers are willing to pay a premium for like those kind of like A plus properties, those like really ready to go, all done up. Those will go crazy.
Yeah.
The ones that need carpet, paint, maybe some old water spots, all that stuff, buyers just kind of are seeming to tend to just steer clear of those because those are kind of all over the place, and it's pretty rare you get this like really great condition, really well done property, and those are the ones that go crazy over asking price. But yeah, I mean overall the market, everything is strong. So I don't know how to present this to like the people, but so if we just look at February, because we've already covered January, average sales price is still climbing upwards. So compared to last February, we're up almost 6%.
Yeah.
Right. Days on market is up, like we just talked about. List to sold price ratio also even. So again, easy math. If we list a property for 100K, on average, you're getting 96.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's how it was last February too.
Right.
But if we look at actual pending and closed sales, we're down. Right. So this is kind of a gauge on demand.
Yeah.
Right. So we're down only 4% basically on closed sales, which isn't too bad. But pending sales are down almost 13%, which means I don't know if maybe politics or something, but like we're starting to see where pending sales aren't keeping up. And so we're starting to have some less transactions right now, actually, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna, and I made the.
And this is all a month late, right? So they have to have a month close out, right? So we're into March now, but these just got released last week for February stats.
So your average days on market from like January to March, or I'm sorry, January to February, like goes up by like a week, right?
Yeah.
7 days. I mean, there were just 7 brutal days in February that nobody wanted to leave the house. I mean, I think
exactly.
I think so much of this is weather related. And so I had my owner, Mike Miles, who is just like never wrong about anything mortgage related. So I had him put some numbers together for me just so you can kind of see what's going on at Fountain. So we track a couple different metrics. QLs, qualified leads. That's like our leading indicator. Basically, somebody does an application and they have I think it's a credit score of 600 or higher. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean we can't get them done under 600. It just means that's just the metric that we use. And so February 2024 to February 2025. 218 in 24, 221 in 2025. So that's flat. Okay. Yeah. So locks, that means you've got somebody under contract. They are locking in the rate. We're moving towards closing. February 24 had 71. February 25, 81. Right. So that number's increased. Mm-hmm. Now our closings from February 24 to 2025, dropped by 20. It was a pretty big drop.
Yeah.
But I think so much of that is tied to the weather.
Yeah, some of it's seasonality and all that stuff. So.
And so then you step into, so we're halfway through March now, and we are pacing in every metric. We are pacing quite a bit more QLs, locks, as well as anticipating closings for March. So cool. I just think we are going to see seasonality play. Yeah,
so in April, usually by the end of like the first week, maybe the start of the second week of April, we'll get the March stats.
Yeah.
And I'll be super interested to see how those. But actually, so an idea I had. So this is for, they call it the Greater Kansas City area, right? I don't know where those boundaries end. You know what I mean? So
yeah, but the lesser stuff they leave off the list, just the greater stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So what I did, because I was super curious, I didn't print it off, but I was like, okay, I want to compare, because this is very, like we know the real estate market is hyper local, right? Mm-hmm. So Clay County is different than Jackson and Wyandotte and Platte and all that stuff, right? So I actually wanted to pull this for each county and see, because then you can start to see what areas are more so in demand, which ones are growing, which ones are slowing down. So I think that would be super interesting to see. And I was like, I'll just make a little map of here's Clay and here's Platte and here's Jackson, So I think going forward, I want to try to do something like that where we can actually get a better, because these are very, these numbers are all over the place.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you pull, I pulled them for Clay, and the days on market is way different than everything. Right. And so because this includes some really rural areas, that just tend to move slower. And so I feel like sometimes these numbers can be a little deceiving just because it's such a wide range of such an area that it's hard to actually know what's really going on.
Yeah.
And so it seems that if we can break it down county by county, we'll be able to actually kind of know area by area what's going on
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, and you know, I just know I know what I deal with. Like, you know,
Yeah,
in
for
terms
sure.
of, you know, I live up north. I have a decent number of realtors like you in the Northland that I work with, but like, you know, I'm in Springfield, Missouri as well, and all over Johnson County. And so I think that if you look at a different market, like, so we know Johnson County is just like super hot, right? It just has been. It has been. And I think, and there's reasons for that, right? There's a lot of growth there, but I think if you start dialing in like specific markets, you know, whether it's county is probably the best way, the most efficient way to do it in the Kansas City metro. I think that like that's if you're the guy who's looking for the deal, the person that's looking for the deal, like you're not just like you know, some people.
Location.
Yeah, some people just like want a school district. I sort of think the school district thing is like kind of nonsense because every school district out there today is providing better education quality than anything like 30 years ago. Right. So whatever, you know, I mean, if that's why you want to live there, I'm all for it. If that's why you don't want, I'm against it. You know, whatever you need to do.
That's a whole different topic.
Yeah, and so, I mean, you are perfect. You can graduate from a really good high school and be a complete idiot, just like, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Like, you know, but I think that if you're the type of person who is looking for a deal, looking for good value, now you balance all that stuff out. You know, I think that looking at it by county, that's where you're going to see.
Well, that was kind of the idea. Is like, okay, we can like, you know, how's the market? Well, it depends where you're looking, right? Like, like this is on sale right now. This is, you know, you're gonna have to go over here. You know what I mean? So it's just it's gonna give us a better lay of the land as far as like.
Do you get people that like come to you without like an area that they're looking? Like I'll live anywhere, or are they typically like
people say that, and then you start like taking them to some places and like, no, you know what I mean? So people usually have a general idea of where they want, because like they have family nearby, or maybe, you know, school or work. You know, some people work remotely, so that like it's not quite as big of a deal, but location is always a factor. Like sometimes people say, no, you know, I don't really care, but then once you actually start, you know, going out and looking at houses, like, oh, I don't like this area very much, or this neighborhood, you know, has a lot of cars parked on the street and blah blah. So it's always a factor. Yeah, really.
But it's also, you know, and I imagine that's also tied into like kind of where people are at different stages in their lives.
Yeah, right? And it depends like what's nearby, right? Like some people that don't like to commute, you know, want to be closer to, you know, stores and restaurants and shopping and all that stuff. Some people want to be far away from that. So then, you know, you usually get a pretty broad range of like, I want to be like closer to the city, or, you know, farther out, and, you know, depending on what they're looking for, right? So if you want a big lot, you know, obviously, you usually got to go a little farther out for that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean, my wife wants to be like, you know, in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
You know, surrounded by trees, except for like a huge space that gets nothing but sunlight, so she can garden. Like, so she wants to be like out. Well, I want to be within 15 minutes of like 20 coffee shops with Wi-Fi and couches. Yeah. And so it's, you know, it just kind of depends on where you're at with it. But yeah, I mean, we know this. I mean, we know the parts of Kansas City that are super, super hot, but we also are aware of some opportunities where there's a lot of value in other parts. It just depends on what you're looking for.
Exactly. I like that you pulled like applications and stuff as well, because like, again, this stuff is like delayed, right? Like this happened a month ago.
Yeah.
Now, like it takes a long time for like these associations to like get all the data and put it all together and all that stuff. But I feel like mortgage apps are like almost the best way to keep your thumb on everything, because like that's real time data that you're like, okay, like we're seeing an increase in applications, which again is another driver of demand.
Yeah.
Right. So we can look at closed sales, but that's last month. We don't really know what's happening right now, and so you know, we're looking, and you can look at the hot sheets on MLS and see, okay, you know, 30 houses closed yesterday and blah blah. And if you're like a pro at Excel, you might be able to like, you know, throw all that in, but that's not me. So I feel like mortgage applications are just a great way to kind of keep your thumb on what's the actual demand happening right now.
In the last few weeks, I mean, I've just taken more and more applications, you know, and I'm just having more and more real estate related conversation. But, you know, we had one of the guys on my team today. I mean, he's got 3 contracts from the weekend.
Yeah.
You know, and there were multiple people, you know, I mean, it was a little irritated because I didn't have one. But
right.
Like, you know, I mean, it is what it is. But it is definitely, it is the spring. I mean, the weather, it's nice outside. Things are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, exactly.